Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Creating an 8-Point Marketing Strategy for User and Investor Acquisition Campaigns from DNA. And very excited to have Kevin Bates on the line here today. Kevin is our lead marketing strategist, has been working with us since 2018, June 2018 at that, over 65 different strategies to date. But whole background behind that. Kevin, I want to go into your history a bit, tell the audience about some of your experience, about why all of this matters and everything that's behind it.
Sure, Jason. Good morning and excited to be on the panel today. As you mentioned, I've worked on about 65 marketing strategies with DNA over the past 2.5 years. That's a mix of user and investor acquisition campaigns. And prior to DNA, spent time with a consulting group here in Los Angeles working on a lot of the investor campaigns, more from a Regulation D perspective, with a focus on research, projections, business planning, and pitch deck creation for those companies. And so now seeing how that's transitioned into some of the modern fundraising efforts that DNA leads. So very excited to be talking through the marketing strategy and how it applies on these launch campaigns today.
Excellent. So business analyst turned marketing strategist turned equity crowdfund specialist. And when I talk 65 campaigns, we're looking at millions of dollars of capital that these plans have physically produced. We're going to give you the full formula today. We've prepared a deck just for this webinar here, and this will be available to all participants. Can email us afterwards and can make sure to get you a copy of the document here, prepared by our content marketing manager, prepared by our team in regards to this presentation itself. And the system itself is something we built to simplify the strategy process, took out a lot of the elements that were redundant. We're able to use this as a roadmap, an algorithmic strategy, if you will, to roll out your content marketing, to roll out your advertising, to effectively raise capital on any of these platforms, and then to later be applied to your user acquisition initiatives. So planning is everything. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Can't say that enough. And there's a whole list of different quotes that I use to speak about how valuable this process is. We'll often see groups want to hop right into marketing, and they hit different barriers, they hit different obstacles that could have been refined through the strategy process. To have a deep understanding of your business, and especially in terms of your target audience, marketing trends, what they're doing, being able to apply that to your campaign, and the actual steps you're going to follow right out of the gate is beyond important, and mostly to align on the KPIs, the key performance indicators that are going to be the measurements of success and failures. Kevin, you want to go over this page and talk about why plans are so important in your eyes, what it's meant as a business analyst, and on the activation of our clients' campaigns to hit their goals?
Sure. And I think one point just to add into the goal of a marketing plan is it is really making sure that you're ahead of these campaigns from the beginning. So spending this time in strategy and planning can allow you to become a bit more informed about what the market is doing and where it's heading, your competitors, also making sure that you have all of the moving pieces of a marketing campaign fully in place and fully put together from the beginning. I have seen, where some cases on campaigns, when you start to lag or start to get behind, it feels like a lot to take on. So planning and strategy is really that first place to make sure that you're being proactive with those efforts. And it's definitely a balance between the activation and getting the marketing moving live with some of the more academic and strategy pieces. But I think having a good balance is important. And I would rather move into a campaign having both of those firing on all cylinders than moving into activation, not having a strategy, or really vice versa.
Exactly. And so much is found during this process. They say a plan, the real value is the process itself, not just the finished product. So we built this system to be definitive in terms of what's needed. It can have subsections, as you can see on this page here. And again, everyone can have a copy of this. We won't go word for word, but here is, the outline of it, starting with industry analysis, going into target market profiles, competitor audits, micro elements, including channels, creative, strategic partners, and projections. So, in sequence from one section to the next. Written about this in Forbes, had a two-piece series on it there, lead workshops on it regularly, and take different groups through this with our marketing campaign programs, which Kevin heads up directly. So here is how we approach it. Kevin, do you want to talk about the industry analysis and what recommendations you have for founders, for marketers who are putting together the plan, and in this first section?
Sure. And just to start out, these 8 points mirror really two categories of work that's done during the planning process. I think first is getting more of the research done. So that's the industry, the competition, as well as who your target market is. And those are very due diligence, market research focused. From there, the later sections really get into the activation, what is going to be posted when, what advertising channels, so going more into the specifics of the marketing plan. So starting out with the industry analysis, this is really the section where you can help refine the company's value proposition, which is extremely critical for investor acquisition campaigns. There's a lot of different advisors and people working on the campaign, but it's always good to go through, look at different reports within your industry and have those key campaign themes that you want to mention as to why your business is going to be a top investment opportunity, or if it's more of a user acquisition approach. It's still important to understand what are customers looking for, what are other brands in the space doing, and really being able to see from a 30,000-foot viewpoint what's happening in this space, so that can inform some of the subsequent sections in the plan.
And I'll tell you, working on these different plans with Kevin, working on them for the past 7 years, and before developing this model and other formats, we'll often hear from clients things such as, we already know our industry, we know everything going on there. And I could tell you there hasn't been one plan we've worked on where we haven't brought something new to the table. And whether we're talking about the industry analysis or we're talking about the competitor marketing audit, as we see in the next section here, we're always trying to determine what are the target audiences looking at in real time. Because I could tell you, for our clients that are live here in December, I have over 20 live equity crowdfunding campaigns, over 40 live campaigns as a whole. The dynamics, the overall sentiment across these verticals is significantly different than it was in August, even more so in March, March 2020, big month, November of 2019. So it's crucial for us to understand the pulse and what's happening today. On the competitor marketing audit, I want to know everything that other groups in the vertical are doing to obtain market share, be it of investors within equity crowdfunding or users within their respective industry. Success leaves clues. I want to know what's working for them. I want to stand on their shoulders. We do a SWOT analysis, look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of what they're currently doing, and to adopt it in the further sections of this strategy, which lay out the framework of the plan to follow. I want to know, as you can see in this list of 1, 2, and 3 here, what are they doing on the organic side? Which publications, which influencers are talking about them? What type of content are they featuring? What is getting the engagement? For their own platforms, what social platforms are they, what social media channels are they using? What days and time of week are they posting? What type of content is getting the most engagement? What can we do to replicate that within our own programs? There's platforms that we can use to sign up for further email marketing. Pro tip, creating a learning email address and being able to be in their system for newsletters and social media channels, being able to get an understanding of the frequency that's associated there. As you can see in number 3, we look at SEO tools, can see how much they're spending on ads, which keywords they're using. On Facebook, you can look at what advertising creative that they're running. Our whole philosophy towards marketing is summarized in these 3 words: test, optimize, scale. It was tough to do, by the way, to break an entire agency's operations into 3 words. And we follow the 3-1-3 method by Ryan Folan for that. But testing, optimizing, scaling in the competitor's eyes, if they're repeating different channels, if they're repeating different behavior, there's a reason why. So we want to be able to adopt that into our program. We don't want to just shoot into the dark. We want to know exactly what's working in the industry today, and being able to use that as a starting point, as an advantage.
And also just wanted to mention, Jason, that I think this sets up the next section in terms of looking at the target market. When we're building out that list and you're signing up for competitors' newsletters, you're being targeted with advertisements from competitors. When you start going down those digital funnels, you're going to feel that experience that a potential investor or customer would have. And I think that gives the opportunity to find additional areas where maybe we can be more creative with the marketing than some of our competitors are doing. So you get to see that firsthand. And then moving into the target market profile, that's where we can use more of the macro research to start understanding who are we specifically targeting. First of all, is where is the research pointing to from an overall themes perspective? And that might be kind of the largest group or where the most demand is. But the second question, which is critical, is if you do have existing customers, if you have some early, focus group participants, what are they saying that they most resonate with, and who do you feel is going to be the best fit? And making sure that we're matching not just what the research and all the data is saying, but also those live conversations with the founders, the reason that they're starting this business. And so pulling in both of those elements. And so it does take typically a few conversations to really match both of those concerns around who are we targeting. And then that helps to inform the strategy and the tactics and channels, advertising, moving forward for the client's launch campaign.
And we say personas. We really want to create a fictional character. We want to personify the audience that we're going after. We want to know all of their touch points. If we have 2 different profiles, 3 different profiles, if we're looking to target Samantha, Kristen, and Steven, what does Steven do on the weekends? Who are his biggest influences? Where does he go online each day? Those screen time metrics that we get, what do his look like? What are going to be the touch points in this next section of marketing channels that we can look to use? We can literally have a presence, both paid from advertising and organic from content marketing, at each of those different destinations that they visit digitally. The following section, creative, which we're going to get into, we'll be able to look at the target audiences and really get a gauge. Hey, is this something that Kristen would respond to? Is it similar to other types of messaging that she's getting from other types of groups that advertise her within this vertical or other industries? We want to be able to get a realistic sense of what are the different stages of the user journey, of the investor journey going to consist of. And that all begins with the user, with the investor themselves. And, we take this data, everything's progressive and leading into the channel strategy. It's already mapped out for it. It's already defined. Hey, we need to be at these different spots because of what we found about these different audiences. So, determining the target market and the audience's needs. What are Samantha's needs? Speaking to investing, why are they investing? Are they a retail investor? Does this reflect different headlines that they're reading on Business Insider or Forbes or TechCrunch today? Are they trying to set up their portfolio in a certain fashion and have been told by a financial advisor that they can put 10% into high risk type investments, including early stage private equity? Is this an accredited investor and they're looking to create more of a shelter before the year closes? Is this, to broaden their exposure, in a different industry? What is the reason that they're investing, and how do we speak to that? We tend to find a lot of experience investors within the vertical. People want to be involved in a certain industry. So, fun fact around that, which I've been in think tanks about with other industry professionals. Also, what are the business needs, the competitor strategy? Your channel strategy should include organic efforts, the distribution of that organic. Don't just think about how great your site's going to be, how great your offering page, the emails that you're writing, anything that you're doing on social. Look at actually how it's going to get traffic. Paid media being a big scalable tool to use in that regard. You want to make sure it's converting before you distribute too much, but what does the actual distribution model look like? How are you going to intentionally bring high volumes of the audience to that funnel that you're building? And of course, an overview of it. Kevin, do you want to add to that a little bit as we're moving to the next page here?
Sure. I think one thing just to talk through in terms of audiences, definitely there's the opportunity to test those, especially through advertising as well. So as we're building out 3 personas for a client, or you're putting that into your marketing strategy, I think it is important to think through, are there different recommendations, maybe even to each of those personas, and how can that be tested for the campaign? Also, in putting together the channel strategy, especially at more of the launch phase, I think it's important to think through timing and more of a phased approach. So what is the initial channels that are scalable, that make sense for your budget, as a startup or early stage company? And then also, what do those look like in the future if we are seeing performance? What are some of those next opportunities based on all the research that was done? And so, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's perfect, Kevin. If you want to segue that into organic here.
Sure, of course. And so on the paid media or media channel side, definitely it's paid and organic. On organic, we're looking more at the social media, the email newsletters, all the pieces that are informing more of the content strategy, which is more the consideration phase of the marketing funnel, with paid advertising more coming in at top of the funnel, which we'll also discuss. It's important to think through and really leverage the research that was done in informing these channels. So where do those personas that were built out live? Is that on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn? And also, what's really going to speak the most to them? Is it going to be video content? Is it going to be email newsletters? What are they most comfortable receiving? And so I think thinking through those pieces and then putting together a list of topics, a list of themes that can go out and matches each of those channels is really what we're typically developing as we're creating content calendars, for clients as they're approaching these launch campaigns.
And, going back to the business plan days, the marketing plan could be a small section in the business plan. In some of the client documents documents that we look at that says, hey, we're going to do some posts on social media, use influencers, and tap into ads. We want to go much further here. We want to talk about exactly what we're going to do on each channel. In the following section, we'll put the actual messaging, graphics, everything that's going to constitute the content calendar, as Kevin's mentioning, everything that's going to be rolled out as the initial framework of the plan. But in this section, we really want to talk about types of content, how new content is going to be developed, the channels it's going to go across, what we're doing on those channels. This stems from the competitor audits. This stems from what audiences, target audiences are doing on any of the community channels. It should have goal benchmarks. That's going to come in handy during section 7, which is projections. The only way to measure anything is with numbers. So we like to define reach, traffic, engagement that we're looking to hit from each of these pieces of content. Can actually use it to gauge what's working, what's not working. Also, when looking at our content strategy statement, there's all types of great documents that we use in-house that stem from this article, which will be available to you in the deck. I'm also going to share it here just as an overview for reference, and I'll include a link in the chat box here. But here is some examples of templates that you could use for creating your organic content strategy, all beginning with a core content strategy statement and an ad lib, if you will, that you fill in the goals, adjectives about your business, the audience, and you want all content to be an extension of this statement. So although this looks like a simple kids exercise, could actually require a lot of work, a lot of A/B testing itself, and then everything from there is going to stem from that philosophy. Using the core content strategy statement to choose topics. Here's a topic or idea, meeting business goals, meeting the campaign, the Reg CF, Reg A plus goals, the audience's needs. Again, why are the audiences participating? Looking at topic or content ideas, this is what it looks like filled in. Add the core content strategy or statement to your editorial checklist. This is a good working structure to be able to base your calendar on. So again, gonna add that to the chat here before moving back into the document, and wanted to give that to you as something that you could physically fill out. Getting further into the content, we look at content distribution and speaking to those metrics before as a focus. And in many cases, our clients will be creating the content and be looking towards us, towards distribution. So I make that distinction of development and distribution. You can look towards publishers and third parties, could look at a PR agency to leverage different relationships there, as well as different types of publisher outreach that can be done through various social channels, including LinkedIn and Twitter, perhaps through breaking news type sections of the publisher sites themselves. Press releases, great way to get syndication, to have your content appearing across high volume of sites. I wouldn't look at this as a way to get features on any sites. We have seen groups look to add publisher logos as featured on, as seen on, can be very easy by adding these logos afterwards. Anything to create social proof is generally associated with a higher conversion rate, a higher level of engagement. Audiences generally don't trust what they see online. So the more third-party validation that you're able to demonstrate on your offering page, on your marketing materials, the higher response you're going to get, at least as a rule of thumb. Influencers, want to mention, it's all in the follow-up when we're talking about publishers and influencers. Don't reach out once and expect to be covered by your wish list. Don't be surprised if you're presented with rate cards from influencers. Don't be surprised if you see different paid programs, advertising programs that publishers point you towards. Social media groups, great underrated target here. However, don't go in and start self-promoting out of the gate. Add to the conversation. Look to connect to group members directly rather than adding to a topic that's self-promoting. Look to have people asking you. Consider it like a physical party. I make a lot of these offline online comparisons, and you want to ask about people there, get an understanding of them, wait for them to ask questions about you, be able to share what you're doing, have it as an organic relationship that's occurring with these groups and individuals within, but understand that these are focused organizations that you can tap into, and social media partners that you can tag, reach out to for social media shares, different types of shout outs. You're doing all this research and being able to define different targets for this. So, I've seen amazing content with no eyeballs behind it, and I've seen mediocre content that's distributed and being shared, right and left. This is definitely an area that you should not, browse over and say, hey, we're going to get some distribution. For our type of marketing, we're really focused on the algorithms, on the traffic that follows from distribution. So I could tell you right now, you can't spend enough time in this area of the strategy.
And I think just to go off of that, it's important to make sure that the entire strategy is holistic. So everything is building upon all of these pieces is we're building the content calendar. You can take in all of that research that was done and help that to inform which campaign themes you're working into the content. And moving into, advertising as well, really balancing what initiatives are happening across earned, paid, and owned media. So trying to think through on your email newsletter content, social media posts, plus the advertising, making sure that you have the right traffic and messages, but then also what are those people going to be seeing and follow-up touch points from your brand. And so I think that's where making sure that those brand messages, going back to that, key content marketing sentence on your brand is really important. And especially for brands that are doing equity crowdfunding campaigns where they are looking for investors, but there is that crossover with potential customers in the future. And so thinking through, even if this is one initiative for, raising capital, it can be used in the future for other, goals. And so really balancing each of those goals as part of everything that's being developed. So getting into the paid media strategy, it is important to leverage which channels you will be running those advertisements on. Also looking at which ones you may consider in the future. And budget is, in some cases, an initially limiting factor, but those can be scaled with performance. This is also the opportunity really to test those different persona groups on an equity crowdfunding campaign that can be that mix of maybe more accredited investors that you've already had conversations with, could be some of your potential customers that you want to reach and turn into brand ambassadors. But really looking at building out on this slide, both the creative needs for that paid media, looking at which different channels you're going to be operating on, and then later on, tying that to specific projections in terms of how much can we acquire a customer for, what does the long-term value look like, some of those pieces of the paid media approach.
Yes, and advertising is our primary offering as an agency because it's so closely tied to performance. It is a top recommendation from equity crowdfunding portals. Speaking to the investor acquisition side of things, we can A/B test here different audiences. Just did a webinar last month on turning one advertising dollar into 10. And if we're beginning with 4 to 10 audiences, 2 to 6 creatives each, we can then optimize by creative, by audience, later by channel, seeing some different examples for channels here. Can look at different algorithms for averages, speaking to audience reach, speaking to click metrics, and speaking to conversion metrics, impressions, clicks, conversions. Get back to that in the projection section here too. And as we're doing that, can identify the top drivers and scale from there. So a big part of our strategy is focused on these elements. Also, when we're talking about audiences, we're talking about who we're reaching on these platforms, see a question here on whether we're talking about investors or customers of who buy a product. And there is a natural crossover there on Reg CF, Reg A plus campaigns, which can reach both accredited and unaccredited investors, retail, and more active high net worth type investors. The user owner audience is becoming more and more attractive. We've seen different types of entertainment issuers of stock. We've seen different types of e-commerce, local businesses run equity crowdfunding campaigns, targeting their existing customers and looking to bring them on as investors, treating the customers, their current patrons as potential investors. Vice versa, we've seen audiences targeted as an investor who then come on to be regular customers. Sometimes there's perks involved. Even beyond the perks, they're very active customers because they're attached directly to the project as such, as well as ambassadors in many cases. And I don't want to make that sound like fluff of, hey, you're bringing on investors, but they're really ambassadors. However, that's what I'm hearing directly from founders is, yeah, they brought on 1,000 investors. They raised a full 1.07 million. And now every time they post, they have 100 other individuals reposting, which brings on to another question here. Can you give an example of the type of posts you might tag and share social media partners on? The easy targets are the ones that you already have a relationship with. So WeFunder actually makes a recommendation in their marketing materials to do a post on LinkedIn and to tag different investors, to invite investors to comment on the post itself. So if you get over 200 different investors, 200 first degree connections to comment on there, even if your campaign's at 200K and average of $1,000 each, it's a real round number, by the way. The average investment amount can range. Regardless, if that's occurring, that's going to speak as loud social proof. That's going to have a very positive effect on the social media platform's algorithm, number two. And number three, that's likely going to show up in the feeds of people that you're tagging. It's likely going to show up in the feeds of those that are commenting and engaging on LinkedIn as a result. This can be done for further social media partner targets with publishers that you have a relationship with organizations that you have a relationship with strategic partners. I've seen 4-panel interviews where the issuer has an accelerator that accepted them, invested in them, consulted with them on the screen, their anchor investor, and a investor group that was promoting to a high volume of followers the deal. And that served as very strong validation. That served as that social proof in an exponential level. You can, go beyond your connections and partners and look towards tagging very active social profiles even in a given vertical. We'll do so at times for equity crowdfunding content and even build relationships off that. So a lot of different targets around that. And want to move to the next section here, but just to answer that question further, the investors you're tagging, are these potential investors, ones ones you've already invested? Is this something you do on LinkedIn, but also Facebook? Yes, these are generally investors that you have an existing relationship with and or have participated in the deal directly. To do it with prospective audiences, I would still recommend having some type of relationship in place. But on Facebook, on secondary social channels such as Twitter, you can, look to comment, look to share. We'll get featured on our content and tagged on it quite often, and we'll often reciprocate. And there's a whole shout out component, but that's generally around content. That's not usually with the prospective investor as much as another content developer that we're going back and forth with. And hope that answers the question to a strong degree. Happy to talk about this further directly as well and answer more questions as we go through here. But we always welcome a warm marketing discussion. Can have a chat just like this one-on-one over Zoom. So feel free to reach out to us directly via our site. Want to talk about the funnel next here, as this speaks to the user journey. Generally seeing 7 to 17 touch points before a conversion occurs. This is the process. Kevin, do you want to talk about how you formulate the strategy to speak to audiences at different stages of the funnel?
Sure, and I think that goes into some of the questions we're answering well also. As mentioned, we want to make sure that the funnel is thought through holistically and we're bringing all of these elements together. So if it's taking 7+ touch points to get somebody to convert online, let's make sure that we're stacking these tactics. First of all, is we need to make sure that there's enough traffic coming into the funnel to be able to really see those results that a founder is looking for, whether that's an investment campaign or user acquisition. So using scalable advertising channels to get the right viewers of that content, and then going into interest, consideration, really some of those follow-up points. That's where content marketing, creating webinars, having, potentially investor panels, all these pieces can be additional things that are shared out with that audience that maybe saw a Facebook ad, saw somebody who tagged your company in, another partners post, and really being able to bring all of that together towards somebody finally clicking through, purchasing the product, making an investment is a key piece. And all of these stages do have different conversion rates, but I think founders should look at each of these as steps within that process. So the more that you can increase each of those elements, it's going to lead to that overall feeling of, hey, I've been seeing this over time. I was reminded of it. I was followed up with. I see that they're doing big things, and that's going to lead me to that next phase of the conversion.
Exactly, and can't emphasize the strategy section, the funnel overview section enough here. We speak to different issuers who are looking to get their marketing live tomorrow. They expect to see results the next day, and it's not really that game of checkers as much as a game of chess. It's a saying I actually take from Gary Vee, but speaks to it in such a clear way, in the sense that your target audiences aren't seeing the offering and putting in their payment info that day the majority of the time. More times than not, it's this ongoing conversation. And if you look at it from that 30,000 foot up view, you could determine the actual roadmap, the investor journey, the user journey that they're going through, and being able to increase conversion rates at each stage and understanding what the audience is looking for at those different points to build trust, to build engagement, to build a relationship with your brand can make all the difference. And you can look at which creative goes in at each stages of the funnel. Doing a creative audit of your existing content, determining what elements are going to be used to attract, to engage, to convert traffic, being able to determine what visuals that you want to add and have developed, and which type of copy needs to be created in that content calendar in detail for the first week, for the first month, what social media themes are going to be used, what type of long form content is going to be produced, are there platform updates, campaign updates, emails that will be created throughout the campaign. Again, that link that we used before, it does date a couple years back there, but still a very relevant format in terms of how one of these calendars can be created. Have more pro tips to the side here, which talk about different types of content and show the campaign as a whole versus just what's coming out the first week. So what type of announcements are you going to make when each milestone's reached? I'll give you a hint. If you just say, hey, we reached 100K, hey, we reached 150, and it's the same general narrative each time, you're selling yourself short and not going to get the same type of engagement as much as if each one's well thought out and is the different chapter in the story that your investors are engaging with.
And I think at this phase, it's also helpful just to go through that funnel. There's a lot of, funnel mapping tools that have been created. Most of them are free to use. Building out, somebody's seeing a first advertisement, they're receiving a follow-up message, and in what time period, they're getting social media content, they're being retargeted with ads, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks later, or whatever that time frame is. In some cases, building that out visually can help to think through what content should be sent out to this audience and what have they seen before. And definitely making sure that you can build out each of those touch points and have associated creative so that you have strong design, strong messages that's all tied into those, brand messages that were developed during the research portion. And so that's where, taking more of the creative side of things and the messaging and incorporating that into the funnel is critically important so that you have both of those working together for the success of the campaign. And then the next piece after that's done is we're looking at advertising and budgets, and we'll get into projections moving forward. But on strategic partners, that's where we can start having and looking for organic reach. So if we have others that have large online followings that are posting about your product or online offering, really being able to drive additional individuals into your funnel. As Jason mentioned, there's a ton of opportunities with collaboration, especially for brands that may be launching, may not have some of the larger budgets as competitors. And so really finding the right relationships and pushing those can be critical for a campaign to balance out some of the other factors. And this includes a lot of different types of individuals. It could be influencers, press, different groups and associations where your target persona lives online, and also finding ways to work with different community groups, charities, different pieces. So leveraging all of these partners and building that community is definitely key to building more of that organic awareness over time.
And I want to emphasize that while quality is crucial here, do not fall short on quantity. And actually want to share a document here, a graph that I've referenced quite a bit. It's sales statistics, and the word sale doesn't have to have a monetary component. This could just be a partnership being developed. And it talks about how many touch points are required for a transaction, for an activation, for some type of partnership to occur. And that the majority of, I'm going to again use the word sales, but you could fill that in with whatever you'd like. Salespeople never follow up with a prospect. Don't reach out once to these prospective partners. A quarter of people make a second contact and stop. 12, a third contact and stop. Only 10% of salespeople make more than 3 contacts. On the flip side, only 2% of partnerships are made on the first contact, 3% on the second, 5 on the third, 10 on the fourth. 80% of these agreements are made on the 5th to 12th contact. So, what does that mean? This isn't a sales webinar. Why are we talking about that? When we look at strategic partnerships, there needs to be some type of frequency. Don't reach out to press. Don't reach out to influencers, to an individual investor or entrepreneurial group, any type of relevant brands who, as Kevin was saying, have a warm, existing, responsive audience of your targets once. Don't reach out to them twice. Have an actual relationship developing there. 4, 7 contacts, already talked about investors, and 7 to 17 touch points is generally where we're seeing conversion. Make it conversational. Make it brief, as if you're physically writing it, if you're using any type of automated tools. I put a pro tip in here about LinkedIn. We use a variety of tools and manufacture our own strategies and our own follow-ups to very specific audiences for LinkedIn networking, where you could anticipate a 20% or higher invitation acceptance rate. So sending an invitation from a founder's profile to an investor group, to an individual investor, maybe they've participated on deals on the platform that you're working on at the moment, even written testimonials about other brands on that platform that they invested in. Maybe this is press, maybe this is a potential strategic partner that can promote to their audiences. You're going to need to send out 100 to get 20 connections, 1,000 over the course of a month to get 200 connections. But then you could message those new contacts, and there's a profile pic, mutual contacts, experience, background, that all leads to more relatedness and supports a 10 to 20% reply rate. Where on email, if we're getting a 2% reply rate, we're in a good spot. We have campaigns performing at 40% reply rates at the moment. So underrated tool that I refer to as LinkedIn for outreach. Advertising, their products are evolving, but outreach, you can find the exact individuals you want to speak to and have volume behind that. So whether it's, hey, we want to promote to your audience, or we want you to consider our deal, this is a great place to be. And as I mentioned earlier, the only way to measure is with numbers. We're very algorithmic in our strategies. We want to build a whole formula on how audiences are going to come in and convert. We want to be able to look at the impressions, clicks, and conversions. We just went over some different algorithms for this in the advertising webinar. But to give you an idea, if we're hitting a 1% click-through rate on Facebook ads, we're hitting averages. Many of our campaigns are 2 to 5%. we project conservatively. Facebook says 1% is an average. We go off that. Google says an average conversion rate is 2.35%. So if we're projecting conservatively at 2%, we could be doing that at each page of the funnel. We could be doing that as the site as a whole on a monthly basis once there's been enough touch points. But you can physically make projections on what you're looking to hit for each channel. Again, paid, but as well as organic. Many people miss the organic side of it. And this allows you to quickly identify what's working, be able to scale it using the right processes, so you're not, rushing it and ruining the algorithm for your brand by any stretch. This also allows you to pinpoint exactly where underperformance is occurring, at which stage in the algorithm, and being able to focus optimizations at that point when something's not working. We've had campaigns that show no results the first three weeks, and by week 6 we're surpassing every performance benchmark that we put in this strategy. So being able to optimize, being able to manage these channels to a point of effectiveness is the difference from a experienced marketer for a given vertical, such as investor acquisition, and a professional who's simply setting up the campaigns. It's all about how to get it to a point where it's hitting the results. And then not only are you seeing return, but you have this traffic source, you have this tool that you're able to scale up. Have some tips here on how to build your budget, looking at a percentage of the total raise and total goal that you're looking to hit, whether it's investors or users, and being able to work backwards from there.
And I think it's exciting to be able to put everything in numbers during the planning phase that isn't in the market, and that's seeing some of those optimizations and tests that are happening during a campaign. But being able to at least define, based on what past campaigns have done, industry research, what can we expect just from things that we can define, let's say from a paid media perspective, and then looking at the entire funnel and saying, okay, what are some other pieces we want to push or highlight or try and improve that performance over time. Making sure that we have clear expectations and putting that in numbers is usually that first starting point in order to do so. And definitely tying that to the brand's overall mission, customer acquisition costs, investor acquisition costs, tying that more into some of those business planning elements is definitely key during this phase. But also thinking about it with different objectives in mind. There is some of that initial brand awareness and launch, and then during the retargeting, we'll see more of that stronger performance. And so as the numbers and the algorithm is put in place with all of these softer factors, the macro trends, the funnel, the key campaign messages, that's where we're bringing everything together during the activation. And so that's really where, we can put all this information that we've developed into key timelines, putting together the key tasks that are needed to get the campaign moving forward, whether that's shooting a video, getting additional campaign creative, putting together a funnel, really starting to move into those activation steps with all of the knowledge that we've built up over the past 8 sections. And just a last point, as we're going through pulling a lot of this information in from all these different categories, which are critical to a successful marketing campaign, I always like trying to summarize this in 1 to 2 pages. And I think that's good just internally, but also being able to describe that to others that maybe haven't gone through this process or aren't as deep into the weeds of the marketing funnel. It's always good to get outside perspectives, outside thoughts, testing that with the target market. So being able to summarize everything that's been stated with the approach, trying to get a sense of, if you saw this online, what would be the feedback and the impact. And so in activation, putting all of this on timelines, building out those next steps. And this is really where it starts moving into more of the project management on the campaign.
Exactly. And I can't articulate enough how valuable this section is for communications with third parties. You've gone through this whole process, whether you're working with a vendor, an agency like us, an ad network, a consultant, various types of advisors, the portal. whether it's a new hire, someone you're bringing in on the team, to be able to show, hey, this is exactly what we're doing. Here's the industry overview, the competitor marketing audit, all the way through, summarized in 2 pages. Here's what we're doing. Not anticipating them to read through a full document. Many times this plan is 40 to 60 pages. I've seen it substantially larger than that as well too. But you can have that other individual sit down and read 2 pages and get a good sense of what's being done, what's occurring from there. And being able to have that refinement on the marketing model is easier for pivots later on. It's easier for scaling, just strong across the board. So I hope this provides a very clear context on how these strategies are produced. Again, this is producing millions in capital a month for groups that we're working with specifically. In equity crowdfunding, the industry is surpassing 20 million a month now. Applying this to investor acquisition across the board. Bitcoin just passed 20K today, working well for investor acquisition for digital assets, all different types of verticals. But it all starts here. It all starts with the plan. There's no vertical that is outside of this. And have a great Seth Godin quote to complete. I've already told you, you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. But marketing's not an emergency. Don't look to just start tomorrow in a frantic state. It's a planned, thoughtful exercise that started a long time ago and doesn't end until you're done. You don't stop marketing. And it's a big difference I see from startups that are successful and those that are not. That grit to continue things until they're at a point where it is working. Don't look at a channel, hey, will Facebook ads work for me? Is my audience on Facebook? Look at how to get Facebook ads to work for you. There's a reason it holds such a powerful place in the different marketing arenas today. And Kevin, anything that you want to add, anything that you want to recommend to complete the webinar today?
No, I love that last quote. I think definitely in seeing campaigns, the more that you can be intentional with the marketing plan, make sure that you're planning for success, working backwards from some of your stated goals and trying to do that in advance is really key. And spending that time to go a layer deeper, look into all the research, start thinking through these approaches, ideally will lead you to be a more informed decision maker as you're looking at different marketing options, and definitely can help with that problem solving because you have more of a wealth of knowledge that you can start leveraging in terms of creativity on the campaign. So I think we've covered all of those pieces, but definitely it's a ever evolving process. And as we said, these plans are constantly changing, not just with a brand and where they are at, but also just what's happening in the world in different industries. So it's a ever changing process that we're always trying to be on the top of.
Awesome. And by the way, everyone, Kevin's being very modest. The effectiveness, the value of some of these strategies he's completing. He's worked on campaigns that put together a strategy within the first week. They hit the full $1.07 million goal. And that one was in the entertainment vertical. Has worked on strategies that continue to optimize and were on raises that were effectively plateaued before we started working with them. And over the course of 6 months, 10 months, we're able to hit their full goal. So, can't paint the picture enough on how much background, how much experience is behind Kevin's insights there.
Appreciate that.
I see one last question that I want to speak to of, can you give examples of strategic partners, and are we asking them to push the campaign? When I think of a strategic partner, I'm generally thinking of initiatives, target audiences, various types of overlaps in marketing activities as a whole, and building a partnership around that. So if it's a Santa Monica, Los Angeles-based startup, and they're looking to build a partnership with entrepreneurial groups in Santa Monica, in LA, could find wins where it's promoted there. If it's a group within a very specific niche of energy, and similar types of organizations are reached out to, and their audience would find value in the content, their audience would be excited to learn more about the opportunity, that is where you can see a lot of synergies. It should come up in the industry overview. It should come up in the competitor marketing audits, later on in the marketing channels. So by the time you get to the strategic partnership sections, there's generally a good perspective map, but we look to elaborate on that further. We put together a messaging sequence, what it's going to look like a few contacts down, what type of content we're sharing. We start seeing calls to action that work stronger. So in some cases it's, hey, push the campaign. In other cases it's, hey, could we collaborate on a piece of content? If you create a podcast, if you are doing a Zoom call or an upcoming blog post, and you give them the ability to contribute, not only will they be involved and you're being able to showcase their thought leadership and your alignment and reflecting value associated with it, but they're likely going to promote it to their audience. So there's all different types of ways to structure these things that are less direct. Hey, can you send this to your audience? May not get the best response, but maybe on message 3, maybe on message 4, you're asking them to do some type of collaboration, and then they're volunteering to share it. Maybe a better look. Kevin, if someone wants to get in contact with you on this call or during, viewing of a YouTube video thereafter, what's your preferred method of communication?
Yeah, LinkedIn is ideal. Feel free to send a connection. And then also email is kbates@digitalnicheagency.com. I'm happy to answer any questions at both of those places.
Amazing. Kevin, can't thank you enough. We put this deck together, seeing it come to life, and your, different types of insights, actionable insights at that throughout the conversation here, beyond expectations. I'm sure the audience is going to have some warm follow-ups from us from there. So appreciate the time today. Thank you everyone for tuning in as well. Hope this has been interesting for you, eye-opening. Hope it's inspiring, and you're putting together your plans right now, raise more, bring on more users, what have you, and do not hesitate to reach out. We'll see you next time. You'll receive a promotion about the next webinar, and please feel free to follow up with additional questions thereafter. Take care.